This is the story of an unusual man who refused to accept the limits the world tried to place around him. At one point, he stood on the edge of total collapse, with almost everyone convinced he had finally gone too far. But long before the factories, the rockets, and the global headlines, there was simply a quiet mind asking impossible questions. While others were satisfied following instructions, he was obsessed with understanding how systems truly worked beneath the surface. He spent countless nights alone, teaching himself complex ideas most people were too intimidated to even approach. Technology wasn't just a tool to him, it was leverage, power, and a doorway to reshape the future. He wasn't the loudest person in the room, and he rarely tried to be. Instead, he listened, observed carefully, and calculated several moves ahead of everyone else. Most people chase stability. He chased scale. Because he believed the future wouldn't be inherited, it would be engineered. He quickly realized that real influence doesn't come from following trends. It comes from building infrastructure that changes how the world operates. So while others aimed for small wins, he aimed for systems-level control. That kind of thinking made people uncomfortable. It also made him underestimated. Leaving everything familiar behind, he entered a new country with almost no safety net. No powerful connections, no guaranteed success. Just relentless belief and an appetite for risk that most would call irrational. He understood something most people never fully grasp. If you control the technology shaping tomorrow, you control tomorrow itself. His first major success came earlier than many expected, proving his instincts were sharper than they assumed. Instead of celebrating the win, he redirected the money straight back into new and bigger ideas. For him, money was never the destination. It was a tool to expand his reach. He didn't want comfort. He wanted scale that could reshape entire industries. He saw sectors that felt outdated, slow, and resistant to real innovation. Rather than complain, he entered those industries and began challenging them directly. Most entrepreneurs look for safe markets. He searched for broken systems. And broken systems, when rebuilt correctly, create massive leverage. Investors were intrigued by his confidence and unusual long-term vision. But many quietly questioned whether his ambition was simply unrealistic. He began speaking about transforming industries most people believed were impossible to disrupt. He wasn't proposing small upgrades. He was proposing complete structural reinvention. That kind of vision doesn't inspire comfort. It challenges stability. And when stability feels threatened, doubt spreads quickly. Executives saw risk. Critics saw ego. Few saw long-term strategy. But he wasn't building for quarterly results. He was building for decades. Rebuilding an industry from scratch demands extreme resilience and patience. Mistakes became public. Failures became headlines. Financial pressure mounted, and confidence around him started to fade. Yet under pressure, his resolve didn't weaken. It sharpened. Cash reserves were shrinking, deadlines were closing in, and expectations were rising. Each delay cost millions, and each mistake invited louder criticism. Some advisors quietly suggested he scale back, reduce ambition, play it safe. But playing safe had never been part of his operating system. He doubled down, invested more, and accepted risks others avoided. Factories stalled, launches failed, and confidence around him weakened. The media called it reckless, unrealistic, even irresponsible. Privately, investors questioned whether he had gone too far. There were moments when bankruptcy felt dangerously close. And yet, instead of retreating, he pushed forward even harder. He believed that breakthroughs demand pressure, discomfort, and relentless persistence. While others protected reputations, he protected the mission. Sleep became optional, stress became constant, doubt became background noise. He reviewed details obsessively, searching for leverage others missed. Every failure carried data, and data meant adjustment. Slowly, small improvements began stacking into visible progress. The same people who once doubted him started watching more closely. Momentum returned, cautiously at first, then unmistakably stronger. What looked impossible months earlier now felt technically achievable. And that shift, from impossible to inevitable, changed everything. The projects expanded rapidly, growing more complex, more expensive, and far more visible to the entire world. Governments monitored closely, corporations paid attention, and competitors quietly adjusted their strategies. What once looked experimental now resembled real infrastructure shaping entire industries. With scale came scrutiny, regulation, political pressure, and constant public evaluation. Every technical flaw became a headline within hours, amplified across global media. Each delay was framed as evidence that ambition had finally reached its limit. Inside the facilities, however, teams were solving problems long considered impossible. Engineers pushed through exhaustion, refining systems down to the smallest measurable detail. Pressure stopped feeling temporary. It became the normal operating environment. Still, he refused to lower the target or reduce the long-term vision. There were moments when a single public failure could erase years of credibility. Entire operations depended on calculations measured in millimeters, milliseconds, and margins of error. If another high-profile setback occurred, confidence might collapse entirely. Retreat, however, would validate every prediction made against him. So instead of stepping back, he leaned further into calculated risk. He demanded higher precision, faster execution, and uncomfortable accountability. Many around him felt the weight, the fatigue, the psychological strain. Yet they also sensed they were building something historically significant. Gradually, results began aligning with the original, almost unreasonable vision. The narrative shifted, slowly at first, from ridicule to reluctant respect. What once looked fragile now operated at industrial scale, delivering results that could no longer be dismissed. Factories expanded, networks connected continents, and timelines accelerated beyond expectation. Entire sectors began adjusting strategies around the systems he introduced. Investors recalculated models, realizing the disruption was not temporary, but structural. Public perception shifted, slowly, from skepticism to uneasy acknowledgement. The same voices that questioned feasibility now debated long-term dominance. Regulators stepped in, attempting to define boundaries for a rapidly shifting future. Innovation outpaced policy, creating tension between ambition and control. Critics warned about concentration of influence, power, and narrative control. Supporters argued that speed was necessary to compete on a global scale. Meanwhile, new projects emerged, even more ambitious than the previous ones. They required unprecedented coordination between engineering, finance, and political negotiation. Each launch, each milestone carried consequences far beyond a single company. Markets reacted in real time, rising and falling with every announcement. His schedule remained relentless, driven by urgency rather than comfort. Sleep became optional, pressure constant, expectations nearly impossible. Yet momentum, once established, became a force difficult to reverse. Competitors raced to replicate the model, rarely matching its intensity. What began as improbable ambition now shaped infrastructure across industries. And the world, whether ready or not, adjusted to a faster future. The journey was never about comfort, approval, or fitting into existing systems. It was about rewriting expectations, even when the cost seemed unbearable. Every failure became data, every setback became refinement, never retreat. He understood something most people avoid facing: progress demands friction. Comfort preserves stability, but disruption creates transformation. The industries he entered will never return to their previous form. What once appeared impossible now feels inevitable. And inevitability is the true sign of structural change. Behind the headlines, beyond the controversy, the systems continue expanding. Infrastructure replaces speculation, execution replaces noise. History rarely remembers the doubters, but it always records the builders. This was never just about wealth. It was about altering the trajectory of the future. And this is only one story of disruption. Subscribe to Ryan Counts to see who reshapes the world next.